Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. And I've kind of got my work cut out for me this week. With Gamescom coming up, I'm having to push out 2 videos a day and pre-upload 1 each day to cover my absence while I'm away in Germany. This is seriously cutting into my World of Warcraft playtime. Doesn't Wargaming understand there's a new expansion out? Oh well, never mind. Anyway, today's offering is something of a compilation video. To begin with, for your viewing pleasure, I am very proud to present what is possibly the least exciting World of Warships battle ever played. Dark Renown sent this one in, and he probably wasn't anticipating having too good a game when he found himself on Islands of Ice in a Tier 10 battle in his Cleveland. And he was right, but not for the reasons he was expecting. What you're about to see is something that I have actually seen happen in World of Tanks many, many times, but until today, had never seen it happen in World of Warships. This is what happens when both teams pull a lemming train. But they pull lemming trains on opposite sides of the map. You see, if both teams pull a lemming train on the same side of the map, you can actually have quite an interesting game. No shortage of targets to shoot at. Not so much when the opposite happens. Oh look, everybody seems to be going south, and I do mean everybody. And if you're in a Tier 8 cruiser in a Tier 10 battle, there's no way you're going north alone. So, Dark Renown joins in on the tail end of the lemming train and heads south with the rest of his team. Unknown to Dark Renown and his teammates, although given that they haven't spotted a single enemy ship yet, some of them might be suspecting that the entire enemy team are doing exactly the same thing, except on the other end of the map, and they're all going north. But wait, enemy ship spotted. Hooray! Time for some action. Actually, maybe not. He's all the way over on the other side of the map. He's well outside of shooting range. Nobody else seems to be shooting at him. Well, I guess we'll just keep sailing south. After more than 4 minutes of absolutely nothing happening, suddenly, enemy ship, and he's in shooting range. Finally, Dark Renown gets to use his guns. Doesn't hit anything, of course, but it's the thought that counts. Now, of course, he's also spotted, and he's in a Tier 8 cruiser. A Tier 8 light cruiser in a Tier 10 battle. Yeah, it might be a good idea to stop shooting and get the hell out of here. So he stops shooting, and he gets the hell out of there. This has not been an entirely damage-free game. Look, some of his team are actually getting shot at. Some of them are even getting hit. But if you take a look at the top of the screen, you will note that the lemming train has finally arrived at the enemy base, and the capture process has started. Almost an entire minute of not a huge amount happening goes by before the enemy lemming train arrives at Dark Renown's team's base, and they also start capping. But Dark Renown's team have been capping for the better part of a minute by now, and the enemy team have seen Dark Renown's team capping for the better part of a minute by now. So you have to ask yourself, the enemy destroyers that are currently attempting to cap Dark Renown's base, wouldn't it have been better for their team if, instead of capping right now, a minute ago they turned around and had come down here in order to spot the ships on Dark Renown's team that are capping their base? Then again, it's not exactly fair to put all the responsibility on the destroyers, particularly when there are radar cruisers around. But there are radar cruisers around. The enemy team have 3 of them, a Des Moines, a Seattle, and a Baltimore. Maybe, well over a minute ago now, it might have been a good idea if one of those 3 radar cruisers had, instead of trying to cap, turned around and headed back down here to radar the 2 destroyers that are currently sitting in their cap circle, well out of spotting range of the Hindenburg, who's being forced to hide behind an island because there are 2 destroyers in the cap circle and they're spotting him. But no, apparently nobody on the enemy team really wanted to win that badly. And so this is what happens in World of Warships when lemming trains collide, or, don't collide, as the case may be. If they had collided, it might have actually been quite interesting to watch, but, well, they didn't. So it wasn't. And look at those scores. Wow, that's nearly 370 experience for the top scoring player on both teams. Well done, everybody concerned. For our next battle, we do appear to have something of a meme developing. A week or two ago, I published a triple Lyon 48-gun broadside of Doom video. This is Practice Target, Serayan and Iridium Wolf, and they are also putting to the high seas in a division of 3 French Tier 7 Lyon-class battleships. Lyon, of course, is the battleship with 16 guns, and just like a TOG platoon in World of Tanks, a platoon of TOGs is not 3 tanks with 1400 hit points each. It's one big tank with insane damage per minute, and 4200 hit points. Similarly, in World of Warships, a division of Lyons is not a division of 3 ships with 16 guns each. It's one big ship with 48 guns. Now, the rules of the game are very simple. All you have to do is ensure that when one Lyon fires at a target, all 3 Lyons fire at the same target at exactly the same time. Beyond that, you're free to pretty much do as you please. Remember kids, if it's funny once, it's funny every time. Practice Target, Serayan and Iridium Wolf, thank you for keeping the dream alive. Finally, and coincidentally keeping the French theme alive, we have a, well, quite frankly, bizarre match here from New Orleans Saints fan in the French Tier 10 cruiser, the Henri IV. Not quite sure what was going on with the matchmaking, although this is the North American server, which isn't the most heavily populated World of Warships server. And it was probably very late at night, so the matchmaking hamsters were asleep, but, well, it is what it is. And the matchmaking isn't really the issue in this battle. Although the fact that there are only 6 ships on each team, that's half a team per side, and the match still took the full 20 minutes to resolve is pretty remarkable in and of itself. Likewise, this battle isn't really about New Orleans Saints fan either, although he doesn't do too badly. No, this is more about the 2 carriers on each team. The carrier on Saints fan's team, you can see, getting off to a pretty good start. And that's not altogether surprising, because with only 6 ships on each side, there's also only 1 anti-aircraft cruiser on each side. Both teams have a Worcester. And New Orleans Saints fan's aircraft carrier player is Kami Samurai. Now, you may not know the name, but then again you might if you've been paying any attention to the North American server King of the Sea tournament. He plays for the WGA clan. He's a pretty good aircraft carrier player. And this match is basically going to come down to him. Oh, and before everybody goes nuts in the comments, although I'm probably already too late, that I said both teams only have 1 AA cruiser, the Worcesters. Yes, I realise that the Henri IV is a cruiser, and it can use the defensive fire consumable, but it's not really an AA cruiser. The anti-aircraft firepower on this ship can be described as mediocre at best. Still, the fact that he does have the defensive fire consumable isn't going to save him, because the anti-aircraft firepower on this ship can be described as mediocre at best. No, the only things that the two carriers in this battle really have to worry about are each other and those two Worcesters, one per team. Technically, you could call the Rune over there an AA cruiser. It can also use the defensive fire consumable, and it has way better anti-aircraft firepower than an Henri IV. But it didn't do him any good either. That's what the carriers look for. Isolated ships alone on one flank without any kind of mutual support nearby, and it doesn't matter whether it's an AA cruiser or not. That kind of target is always going to be the priority target. And to be fair to the Rune, he wasn't trying to make himself a target. He was in fact heading west as quickly as possible in order to link up with the rest of the team. But he just wasn't fast enough. And even though he had the defensive fire consumable and pretty respectable anti-aircraft firepower in the first place, it didn't do him any good. If a carrier decides they want to sink you, if they're even slightly good, they are going to sink you. It's just a question of how many aircraft they're prepared to expend in the process. And this is just one of the many reasons why aircraft carrier gameplay is currently being looked at by Wargaming, and why they're very unlikely to introduce any new lines of aircraft carriers into the game until that process has been completed. Oh, is Saints fan about to pull a Notzer? Yes! He's beached. It's the Jingles landing of World of Warships, pulling a Notzer. Notzer's one of the North American community contributors. Most of you are probably aware exactly of what pulling a Notzer involves, but it's basically the World of Warships Jingles landing. Notzer is infamous, usually when sailing destroyers, for not watching where he's going and driving into islands. Anyway. Ooh, the enemy Grosser Kurfürst. He's already burning, but Saints fan is going to attempt to add to his problems. Oh, and the Grosser Kurfürst has seen him, and there are shots incoming. I very nearly didn't bother looking at this replay, by the way, purely and simply because it was from somebody who called himself Saints fan. You might be wondering, what's the point? What do the New Orleans Saints have to do with anything? Well, it wasn't New Orleans Saints fan on the email, it was just Saints fan. And I'm from Portsmouth. Well, I'm not from Portsmouth, I'm originally from Newcastle upon Tyne. But I live in Portsmouth, and the arch enemies of Portsmouth Football Club are the Southampton Saints. And so, as a show of solidarity for my adopted hometown, I very nearly didn't bother looking at this replay. I'm glad I did, though, because this battle was remarkable for a number of reasons. So, have a look at the map, and look at where Saints fan here is going. Now, remember what I said about aircraft carriers. And so far, the carrier on the enemy team is the only one with a kill. Aircraft carriers love nothing more than spotting ships, and he has been spotted by aircraft. Aircraft carriers love nothing more than finding ships that are isolated with their asses hanging in the breeze, miles away from any kind of mutual anti-aircraft firepower support. And they don't really care, they're not particularly fussy about whether or not that isolated ship is an AA cruiser. And even with the best of intentions, you could never really describe the Henri IV as an AA cruiser in the first place. You could describe the Rune as an AA cruiser, but the carrier nuked him as his first target. Remember that. Speaking of AA cruisers, he's spotted the Worcester, and the Grosser Kurfürst, and the Hindenburg, and they're all targeting him. Okay. The Worcester, this is extreme range for him, and he's going to be lucky to score any hits if Saints fan starts manoeuvring. But the Hindenburg is a lot more accurate at this kind of range than a Worcester is, and the Grosser Kurfürst only has to get lucky once. So Saints fan is very wisely opening the distance and getting some solid cover between himself and this lot. The Grosser Kurfürst missed. Not unusual for a Grosser Kurfürst at this kind of range. Luckily he's outside the Kurfürst secondary range, but look, here come the enemy dive bombers. And he sees them coming, and he blows his defensive fire. Now there are actually 2 squadrons of dive bombers incoming, and his defensive fire does shred the first squadron of dive bombers. But the second squadron of dive bombers, now aware that he's used his defensive fire, peel off before they become victims, and the enemy carrier sends them to attack the Amagi instead. That carrier is now aware that New Orleans Saints fan no longer has his defensive fire ready, and his anti-aircraft firepower isn't that good in the first place. And Saints fan is all on his Jack Jones right out here on the far northern end of the map, miles away from any mutual anti-aircraft fire support. Do you think you can guess what's coming next as he unloads his armour piercing against the broadside of that Worcester over there? Mixed results. Didn't quite give enough lead. The Worcester was moving deceptively quickly, but he adjusts his fire for his second salvo, and that looks a lot better. Yeah, well, damage is damage, I suppose. Disappointing that there were no citadels. Third salvo out, but that doesn't look good at all. And he's starting to attract some fire of his own, but he's realised that the Gross Kurfürst is the priority target here. This is the one coming under the majority of fire from the rest of the team, and this is the target that needs to be focused down. They really do need to kill another enemy ship. Both teams have 2 kills to their name. He's taking some high explosive fire from the Hindenburg, and he is in range of the Gross Kurfürst's secondaries. But it's not really the fire coming from the surface ships that's going to be the big problem here. Okay, the Gross Kurfürst is almost certainly going to die, but the high explosive barrage from the Hindenburg, the Worcester and the Gross Kurfürst secondaries is starting to add up. He's pulled a deliberate Notzer now to try to shield himself from the Hindenburg and the Worcester, but that's not going to save him from the torpedo bombers. There it is. There is a consolation prize. He has managed to sink the Gross Kurfürst, but at what price? Yeah, that was a lot of damage. And the Hindenburg was even able to hit his superstructure with high explosive lobbed straight over the island, which is quite surprising for a Hindenburg. Its ballistic arcs are normally quite flat thanks to the relatively high velocity of its ammunition. So, yeah, that was quite a lot of damage. There are more torpedo bombers in the distance, but they're heading for the Amagi, down to the southwest. But enemy strike aircraft are going to be the least of New Orleans Saints fans' problems for the immediate future, because that Hindenburg smells blood in the water. And he knows exactly where Saints fan is, because he's spotted by aircraft. And there he is. And Saints fan is not going to survive this. He has the armour piercing loaded, but his superstructure's being pummeled. Only 1 gun turret has the clearance. He doesn't get the multiple citadels that he was going to need, and he's dead. And his death is real bad news for the Amagi on the team, because he just got torpedoed by the Midway, so he's used his damage control, which means there is now nothing he can do about the fires that are being inflicted on him by the Hindenburg and the Worcester. And the Amagi is a good ship. It's not incredibly well armoured, but it's fast. And it does have a fair amount of firepower. But it's not fast enough to get away from these two. And the amount of firepower that they're dishing out is... well, he's dead. And the enemy carrier knows that this guy's dead as well, despite the fact that we have yet another ship, alone and isolated, out on one flank, a prime target for attack by an aircraft carrier. The carrier knows this guy's going to be dead before he can recycle his aircraft. And so he's sending his aircraft after a much more unlikely target. He's actually going for the Worcester. Now the Hindenburg is going to be the one that secures the kill on the Amagi here, but before he goes down he does manage to get 1 salvo away, which is going to finish off the enemy Worcester. Speaking of Worcesters, this guy is dead. The carrier is going to sink him. Dedicated anti-aircraft cruiser or not, it's just a question of how many strike aircraft you're prepared to sacrifice to get the job done. And with that, Kami Samurai here in the Midway is the last player left alive on his team. But he is Kami Samurai. He is known to be quite good at playing aircraft carriers. He does it competitively. And again, the odds aren't exactly stacked in his favour. He is 1 against 2, and the 2 are the Hindenburg and the enemy Midway. And the enemy Midway has already proven that he knows a thing or two about sinking ships as well. It's not all bad news, however. The team are ahead on points, and they control 2 of the cap circles. So they've got more points coming in than the enemy team, who control none of the cap circles. But in order to turn that into a win, Kami Samurai is going to have to survive until his team gains another 400 points, and he's got an enemy Midway and a Hindenburg hunting him. Now, he can defend himself against the enemy carrier, but that Hindenburg is going to be a huge problem. Because at this late stage of the game, if he wants to try to strike the Hindenburg and make things a bit easier for him, he doesn't just have to deal with the Hindenburg's anti-aircraft firepower, he also has to deal with the fact that his strike squadrons have been depleted, and the enemy carrier is defending the Hindenburg. And he's also been spotted by the enemy torpedo bombers. So this could be kind of tricky. Right, he's managed to get a full squadron of dive bombers away. We'll see what he's going to do with those, but for now, all eyes are on these torpedo bombers. Now, the good thing, I suppose, about the Midway is that its torpedo bombers at least are only tier 8. And the Midway can use the defensive fire consumable. So he's able to deal with the torpedo bombers. The dive bombers, however, are a slightly trickier proposition. And it looks like they've peeled away in order to wait out his defensive fire, which you have to expect. It is the smart thing to do. Looks like the enemy carrier sacrificed his torpedo bombers precisely to bait out his defensive fire, and he's keeping his dive bombers in reserve. Of course, Kami Samurai has some dive bombers of his own, and they're going for the enemy carrier. Of course, the enemy carrier has its own defensive fire cooldown, so this is by no means a done deal. Well, it looks like he managed to score 1 hit, but they're now being pursued, and it looks like strafed. The second squadron are coming in, and no hits. So he's rapidly running out of strike aircraft. But hang on, where's the Hindenburg? It's been a while. You can see where he was last spotted. Why is the Hindenburg not over here stomping him into the dust? Oh. He's capping Bravo. Well, that's good. There's a dirty great big island between Kami Samurai and Bravo. So, for the moment, this is strictly a carrier duel. And Kami Samurai seems to be winning it, although it's by no means conclusive. The enemy carrier does still have 2 full squadrons of torpedo bombers. Now, they're only tier 8 torpedo bombers. Kami Samurai has just used his defensive fire against the dive bombers. And here they come. And you can see that Kami Samurai no longer has full strike squadrons. It's 1/2 squadron of dive bombers, and that's pretty much it. That's all he's got. Now, unfortunately, New Orleans Saints fan chose this precise moment to follow the progress of the dive bombers rather than pay attention to the torpedo bomber attack that's currently being launched against Kami Samurai's Midway. And the dive bombers, they're not going to get the job done. There just aren't enough of them. Maybe if he had a full squadron and launched a perfect drop, maybe he could have finished off the Midway. But he doesn't have a full squadron. And it's not a bad drop, but he's only got 1 aircraft remaining, and that is just not going to get the job done. Back to Kami Samurai. Now, he has managed to survive the torpedo attack, but despite the fact that he shot down almost all of those torpedo bombers, and the secondary wave of dive bombers that came in as well, earning himself the King of the Air award into the process, he did take some torpedo hits, and he is in fact flooding. His damage control's on cooldown. The fact that his damage control is now on cooldown means that if that Hindenburg hits him and sets even 1 fire, he's probably going to die. So he's flooding. The Hindenburg has now capped Bravo and will be heading this way if he has any kind of sense whatsoever. There are more dive and torpedo bombers incoming. He has no aircraft left, and his position is constantly being spotted by the fighters that are shadowing him just outside of shoot-down range. There's the dive bomber attack. Here come the torpedo bombers. The flooding has stopped. I think he may even have been saving his damage control until the dive bomber attack came in. It looks like his defensive fire is up again in time for the torpedo bombers. There's now less than a minute of the game remaining. There are more torpedo bombers coming in, but they're running into his defensive fire as well. And he's got them. And it's only now, nearly 7 minutes after Kami Samurai was the last ship left alive on his team, and spotted by aircraft, it's only now that the Hindenburg has started shooting at him. Instead of chasing him down and sinking him, the Hindenburg went for the caps. But there just isn't enough time. There was too much of a points advantage for Kami Samurai and New Orleans Saints fans' team for the Hindenburg to ever be able to win this game by getting the capture points. They're now up to 982 points. There's another mostly depleted squadron of strike aircraft in the air. The Hindenburg is shooting, but Kami Samurai only has to stay alive, and he's now actually inside secondary gun battery range of the enemy midway. But if he can just stay alive for a few more seconds, against all the odds, he's actually won it. And on that quite literal bombshell, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.